Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah Stories. Have you ever faced a moment so painful it felt like your world shattered in silence? Today's story is about heartbreak, courage, and the quiet strength it takes to rise again. So find a cozy corner and let me take you there. Golden sunlight spilled through the towering glass windows, casting a warm hue across the ballroom, which looked like it had been plucked from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers floated above like stars suspended in a velvet sky. Rows of white silk-covered chairs and delicate blush roses stood perfectly in place, every detail meticulously arranged for a moment that was meant to be magical. It was supposed to be the happiest day of Emma Blake's life. But there she stood, utterly alone amidst all that splendor, like a misplaced brush stroke on a flawless canvas. Her wedding gown clung to her slender frame, trembling with each unsteady breath. Her eyes scanned the room, desperately seeking a familiar face. Yet all she found were puzzled glances and awkward silence. Derek had disappeared. The ceremony was 30 minutes overdue. Worse yet, Chloe, Emma's best friend, was also nowhere to be seen. Then, a door creaked open at the back of the room. Derek, the heir to one of New York's most powerful financial dynasties, didn't walk in wearing his tailored wedding suit, but in wrinkled jeans and a half-buttoned shirt. At his side was Chloe, her best friend, the one who helped her pick the dress, the one who held her hand the night before, whispering calming words about the wedding night. Now, Chloe stood beside Derek, mascara smudged and wearing a smile she didn't even try to hide. "I'm sorry, Emma," Derek began, his voice more fitting for a boardroom pitch than the shattering of someone's entire world. "I can't do this. I can't marry you. Not when my heart belongs to someone else." Everything after that unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. The laughter spread like a virus, phones raised in the air. Emma's gown looked less like a symbol of purity and more like mourning cloth draped for the funeral of her soul. And in that single, frozen moment, only one thought screamed through her mind. Please, someone make it stop. While the laughter continued to spread like a venomous storm, a sharp, grating sound suddenly sliced through the noise. The scrape of a chair. Heads turned. At the back of the room, a man was rising to his feet. No one had invited him. No one dared stop him. Julian Hart, media tycoon, a name that sent chills down Wall Street's spine, had risen from his black leather chair in the last row. His black suit was flawless, his gaze razor sharp, and when he spoke, his voice silenced the entire hall. Enough! One word, no shouting, no rage, just absolute authority. No one responded. Even Derek stood frozen in place. Emma, still on the ground, didn't register what was happening until a pair of polished leather shoes stopped in front of her. Julian didn't hesitate. He knelt down, his tailored trousers brushing the marble floor without a single flinch. Everyone held their breath. Emma looked up, her vision blurred by tears. But the eyes she met didn't show pity, not disgust, not cruel amusement, just calm. "I won't let them destroy you," Julian said, his voice quiet but unshakable. No one in the room dared utter a word. Julian Hart had just draped his suit jacket over Emma's trembling shoulders like a shield against the arrows of judgment aimed her way. He rose, turning to face the entire room, and his voice cut through the crowd like a blade of ice. "If I see a single photo or video of this posted online," he paused, sweeping his steel gaze across the guests, "I will personally ensure it's the last thing you ever share." A phone slipped from someone's hand and hit the floor. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was pure, unfiltered fear. Emma woke up in an unfamiliar room, early morning light streaming through sheer silk curtains. The air held a warm, earthy scent. Cedarwood, leather, and something else entirely. Safety. She couldn't quite remember how she left the ballroom. Just fragments, strong arms lifting her, the purr of a Rolls-Royce engine, and then silence. Not a silence of pity or judgment, but of space. Space to breathe. The door opened gently. A middle-aged woman appeared, calm and composed. Mr. Hart is waiting for you in the library." Library. The word evoked images Emma had only seen in novels, but when she entered, she understood. 2 floors of dark wooden shelves, vaulted ceilings, sunlight streaming through Gothic windows, casting delicate patterns on Persian rugs. Julian stood with his back to her, espresso cup in hand. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, still composed, still unreadable, yet something in his gaze had softened. "Sit," he offered. "I didn't bring you here to apologize for what happened last night. I brought you here to make an offer." Emma blinked. "An offer?" 3 months, Julian said. "You'll stay here at the estate. I want you to be my companion at events, meetings, public appearances. No romantic expectations, no mistress roles, just a presence that matters." She froze. "Why me?" Her voice came out hoarse. "Because you're not like them," he replied instantly. "Because they laughed while you broke, and I saw a girl who refused to crumble even after being shattered." Julian handed her a sleek leather folder. A contract. Housing. Clothing. A personal bank account. A chauffeured car. Every detail laid out in clean, elegant lines. But the thing that caught in Emma's throat wasn't in the paperwork. It was in his eyes, not the gaze of a man seeking ownership, but of someone who had once lost everything and now offered his hand to someone in free fall. Emma stayed silent for a long time after reading the contract, not out of suspicion or fear, but because, for the first time in a long while, someone was giving her a real choice. "All right," she said softly, barely above a whisper. "I'll stay." Julian didn't smile, but something in his gaze softened. "Your room is already prepared." And so she stayed, not for the money, not for the luxury of the estate, but because, for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a burden. After her parents died, she had lived with a strict aunt, where every mistake was remembered and every dream dismissed. But here, in this place, she could breathe, and for the first time, just be herself. 3 weeks passed like a slow river. Nothing sudden, no dramatic collisions, just small, quiet moments. A cup of tea waiting each morning. Julian's glance at the dining table when she smiled faintly at something in her book. The faint sound of piano drifting through the halls when he played late at night. They didn't speak often, but the silence between them no longer felt like distance. Somehow, both understood. Some wounds didn't need explanation, only quiet companionship. One evening, Emma stumbled upon Julian quietly reading a volume of poetry by the fireplace. He looked up, their eyes met, and in that moment, without a word, they both knew. Something was growing between 2 hearts that had once been shattered. 3 weeks later, the Hart estate was quiet as Emma descended the grand staircase, the black dress hugging her figure like it had been tailored just for her. The gown was a statement. Not the betrayed bride in white, but a woman who knew her worth. Julian waited at the bottom, dressed in a tuxedo as if stitched from night itself. He looked at her, and for a moment, the world stopped turning. "Are you ready?" he asked, not calling her name, not touching her, simply standing beside her like a silent wall of steel. "Never been more," she replied, voice steady and sure. The Rolls-Royce carried them to one of the biggest fundraising galas of the year, a gathering of the city's most powerful names in finance and media. Camera flashes erupted the moment they stepped onto the red carpet, and, with every step Emma took, there was a quiet finality that silenced those who had once laughed at her. She didn't need to shout. She just had to walk like she had never been broken. Inside the grand hall, soft symphonies floated through the air. The crowd shimmered like a sea of light, but Emma saw only one point. The far corner where Derek and Chloe stood. Their eyes met hers, and shock washed over their faces. Julian leaned in and whispered, "They're watching." "Let them," she replied, her lips curling into a subtle smile. They approached, unflinching. Emma held her head high, eyes clear. "Hello, Derek." "Chloe." Her voice was calm, like still water. Derek stumbled over something about a misunderstanding, but Emma raised a hand to stop him. "You don't need to say anything. You both gave me the most important lesson of my life, about trust, self-worth, and who deserves to stay." She smiled. Not with pain, not with rage. Just a woman who had walked through fire and come out whole. As she turned and walked away with Julian, the room held its breath. No one laughed anymore. That night, Emma didn't win Derek back. She won herself the night after the gala. The rain came. Heavy droplets pelted the tall windows of the sitting room as if the sky itself had decided to release all the weight left behind by unspoken things. Emma sat in the library, still in the black dress from the night before. She hadn't changed, afraid perhaps that once it came off, so would the strength it had symbolized. The firelight flickered across the walls, dancing in her eyes, tired but quietly content. The door creaked open. Julian. He hadn't changed either. His tie loosened, jacket draped over one shoulder. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "You did better than I expected," he said softly, taking the seat across from her. "You silenced that entire room." "It wasn't me," Emma replied. "It was you. You helped me stand." Julian fell silent for a while, then finally spoke, his voice low and real. "I lost my wife and our first child, an accident. I was in a meeting, and by the time I got there, it was too late." Emma didn't ask, she just listened. "After that night, I built walls. I couldn't save them, so I stopped believing I could save anyone." She looked up and met his eyes, no longer the cold CEO, but a man carrying scars too deep to show. "But you saved me," she whispered. And in that moment, between rain and firelight, two hearts that had once fallen apart quietly found each other, not through grand words, but through truth and the quiet start of healing. That morning, the sky wore a soft gray, and early autumn leaves began to blanket the gravel path that led out of the Hart estate. Emma woke with a strange mix of calm and unease. When she opened her door, a crisp white envelope sat neatly on her desk, embossed with the seal of Oxford University. Inside were words that made her heart pause. Full scholarship in literature. She had applied months ago, back when she believed her future was tied to someone who was no longer in it. An old dream had returned, but the world around her had changed. Julian entered just as she held the letter in her hand, still afraid to breathe. He glanced at her face, said nothing, then took the letter and skimmed it. There was a short silence before he spoke. "You have to go." Emma folded the paper slowly, her voice barely holding steady. "And what if I don't want to?" Julian looked at her not as the protector, but as a man learning to let go. "If you stay, years from now, will you blame me for holding you back? Oxford is a whole world. I can't be the reason you don't live it." She looked down, hiding the waves of emotion rising inside her. "Thank you for saving me," she said, though her voice wavered with the weight of what goodbye truly meant. "No," Julian replied, his voice steady but quieter. "You didn't just remind me how to live. You made me want to." When she left, there was no dramatic farewell, no tears at the doorstep. But as the car passed through the wrought iron gates, Emma turned back and saw Julian standing still at the second-floor window, framed in silence. He didn't wave, but the quiet way he stood there made her cry the entire ride to the airport. That moment, etched behind the glass, would become the still frame she carried through every lecture hall, every lonely night in Oxford. After the day Emma left, everything at the Hart estate sank into a different kind of silence. No more soft footsteps in the halls, no warm voice in the library each morning. Julian never called, but every few days he sent a message, short enough not to bind, gentle enough to let her know he was still there. "It's colder in London than in New York. Don't forget your scarf. I read a poem today. It reminded me of you. Stop staying up so late." Emma never said much either, but her replies, simple, steady, kept something familiar pulsing between them. "Thanks, still wearing the wool scarf from last winter. That poem, was it really? You should sleep early too." Once, Julian had a business trip to London. On the final afternoon, after meetings had ended, he asked his driver to stop on a quiet street near the Oxford student dorms. And then he saw her, walking out of a little bookstore, arms full of old poetry volumes, hair loosely tied back, wrapped in a soft gray cardigan. She smiled at the bookseller, her eyes lighting up over a title she'd been searching for. She was still the girl he remembered, but stronger, more radiant than ever. Julian remained in the car. He didn't get out. He just watched, as if that alone could warm a corner of his heart. When Emma disappeared around the corner, he looked away, opened his phone, and typed a simple message. Just passed by a bookstore. Don't stay up too late. She never knew that message was sent from the same street she had just walked. And both of them still held a love inside their chests, quiet and unnamed. 6 months later, New York City glowed under a gusty March night. The Imperial Hotel shimmered like a palace in the heart of the city, hosting the year's most prestigious charity gala, Julian Hart's first public appearance in months. He stepped onto the stage with his signature composure, but in his eyes there was something else, something searching, as if among the 100 lights he was looking for something that didn't belong here. Education, he said, shouldn't be a privilege, it should be a chance, and sometimes the right chance can change a life. As his words faded, his eyes locked onto a familiar silhouette near the entrance. Emma, she stood there, not dramatic, not flashy, but present like a quiet light at the end of a tunnel. Her navy moon dress flowed with every step, her long hair curled gently and her gaze, steady, deep, spoke of a journey and a return. Julian went still. The crowd hushed. He stepped down from the stage, each step sure, as though his heart were leading the way. Emma didn't look away, and as he drew closer, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "You came back," he said, his voice hoarse. "I never should have left," she answered. "Oxford taught me a lot, but the most important thing is that I don't need a place to run. I need a place to return to." Julian smiled. For the first time in months, a smile heavy with hope. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a ring. Not new, but the one he had never gotten to give. "I bought this the day you left," he said. "Not to hold you back, but to remind myself not to let go again." He dropped to one knee, right there in the middle of the glittering hall, with hundreds of eyes watching. "Emma Blake," he said, "we once signed a contract to survive. Will you now promise to live this life with me?" Emma laughed through her tears. "If you still want someone who cries over poetry and reads until 3 a.m., then yes." She stepped forward, took his hand, and when he slid the ring onto her finger, the applause around them faded into nothing. All that remained was the warmth between two hands that once had forgotten what it meant to feel. Julian pulled her into his arms, not to protect, but to hold on to the one who had chosen to stay. That night, under applause and camera flashes, Emma and Julian didn't prove anything to the world. They only proved to each other that real love doesn't need to be said early, it just needs to be held at the right moment. Real love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures. It shows up in quiet moments, in the pauses that speak louder than words. If this story found a place in your heart, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to Noah Stories. And tell me, have you ever held on just long enough for love to find you back?